Imagine the sound of your soul before you were born. A silence so ancient, it didn't echo. It remembered. Now imagine that silence interrupted, not by noise but by a whisper. There are libraries made of stone, walls that breathe memory, corridors, lined with books no one has touched in centuries. At the end of one such corridor, a door. No handle, no name, just a fading symbol. A closed eye, wrapped in spirals of gold. You don't know why you're here, but something in you does. It's not curiosity, it's recognition. Now imagine the door opens. Inside, a single manuscript. No title. No author, only a sentence in worn Latin scrawled by hand. Non omnes moriuntur, transeunt. Not all who die cross over. This isn't a video, it's a listening to stories silenced by time, to echoes that inhabit spaces where breath once lingered. What if some souls don't move on after death? Not because they're condemned, but because they've simply forgotten how. Some call them ghosts, others memories. But what if they're full beings, conscious, delicate, human, stuck in the final second of life, replaying the moment their world fractured? You may have felt it. A sudden chill. That moment, when the air stills and you feel watched. A memory that returns uninvited, that doesn't belong to you. Perhaps it's not a memory at all. Perhaps it's someone still waiting to be remembered through you. There are documents not meant for the living, pages that shouldn't be read, unless the soul is ready. Today we turn one of those pages, and this isn't fiction. In the Vatican's less-known archives, fragments describe states of consciousness trapped in transit, stagnant zones, emotional gravity fields, places where souls stay because they can't or won't let go. But this isn't about dogma or fear. It's about remembering. Because maybe you've been there too, in another life, in another version of yourself, between goodbye and return, between the body falling and the soul not rising. This is a call, not to chase ghosts, but to hear them. Because sometimes, in the quietest rooms, someone is still whispering your name. If you're here, maybe you've been called, or maybe you're answering a call that crossed centuries to find you. Don't look for answers. Let them find you. Let's begin. The hidden dilemma of consciousness, suspended between worlds. Imagine a second that never ends. A moment caught between the last breath and the first call of eternity. That is where some souls remain. Not lost, but looped. Not by choice, but by interruption. A split between what wasn't spoken and what can never be understood. There are houses where time has stopped. Rooms where old clocks point forever to the same hour. Not because the machinery failed, but because something else stayed behind. You felt it. The heavy silence. The air that feels aware. Not haunted, just full. So why don't they move on? Why do some souls resist the light, choosing instead to echo? Science doesn't speak. Theology avoids the question. But in the hush between one breath and the next, there are voices. You hear them in cold corners, in persistent dreams, in sudden stillness. Not all spirits are restless. Some are paused, and a pause is not the same as rest. In Jewish mysticism, the Zohar speaks of neshamot, souls that remain near the earth. Not because they are damned, but because something in life was unfinished. A last request, a forgotten goodbye, a sacred debt unpaid. In Japan, they're called yūrei, souls tethered by emotions too intense to dissolve, grief, anger, unspoken love. These souls are not evil, they are incomplete. And what is incomplete seeks return. Sometimes they manifest, more often they don't. They stay quiet, present, almost shy. Their signs are not dramatic, but familiar. A photo that always catches your eye, a scent that comes and goes, a room that never feels truly empty. These are not ghost stories. They are echoes of emotion, residues of memory, calls for completion. Imagine a woman who dies suddenly, leaving a conversation unfinished. Her soul might return to that space again and again, not knowing it can't be finished, not knowing it's already over. That moment becomes her whole world, like a looped recording, a breath that was never exhaled. And yet, the room remembers. The walls absorb the echo. The objects remain loyal to the last vibration. Some souls remain in those spaces, not to frighten, but to find. They aren't searching for vengeance. They're seeking recognition. You're not being haunted. You're being invited to remember, to acknowledge, to help carry the moment that was too heavy for one soul to hold alone. Maybe that chill in your spine was not fear, but invitation. And maybe, just maybe, the silence in certain rooms is not emptiness. It's someone still waiting to be seen. Cayce's vision of continuous consciousness and the waiting fields. In the quiet of a darkened room, a man lay with his eyes closed, not asleep, but journeying. In trance, his mind traveled across dimensions, into landscapes not found on maps, into truths few dared speak aloud. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, left behind more than 14,000 psychic readings. Some spoke of physical healing, others of past lives, lost civilizations, soul memory. But among the most haunting were the ones that spoke of souls that couldn't move on. To Cayce, death wasn't a wall. It was a threshold, a shift in vibration, but not everyone crosses. Some remain in what he called intermediate fields, places outside of time, suspended between densities where unresolved. Emotions act like gravity. In these zones, souls review. They relive. They replay. Not in torment, but in a strange kind of stillness. Many don't know they've died. They awaken in familiar spaces, try to speak to loved ones, reach for objects, but receive no answer. They aren't ignored. They're unreachable. Cayce taught that what binds them is not sin, but emotion. Love that clings too tightly, guilt that corrodes, anger that ossifies, desire that lingers long after the flesh is gone. He called them cords of iron. Not metaphorically, he meant it. Energetic filaments of attachment, woven by feelings too heavy to release. Imagine a mother unable to let go of her child. Her soul might remain nearby, hovering, not to scare but to protect. Yet, her presence becomes a burden for both, because neither can rise while the cord holds, or consider a man who took his own life. Carrying shame, he drifts in limbo, unable to forgive himself. His soul revisits the scene over and over, seeking redemption in a loop that offers none. To Cayce, the key was forgiveness, not ritual, not doctrine. Forgiveness as a liberating vibration. Forgiveness as light, and it had to begin with the self. What is not accepted in life becomes a prison in death, he once said. The soul is free, but it carries the chains it forged itself. So how many of us, right now, are forging those very chains? The grudges we nurture, the apologies we postpone, the grief we never fully feel. These are the weights we pass down, across generations, across veils. Cayce believed these cords could be felt in waking life, through dreams that repeat, names that resurface, feelings that don't belong to the moment. They are invitations to remember, to release, to complete. A woman once recounted how, in deep meditation, she met a presence. It spoke nothing, but the emotion was clear. I'm still waiting. She didn't know the face, but she wept as if she did. And when she left that state, something shifted. She said the air in her home felt lighter. She slept through the night for the first time in years. It wasn't a haunting. It was a passage, granted, through witness, because sometimes to be seen is to be freed. Cayce wasn't preaching religion. He was mapping the unseen, and he believed the greatest guide was love, not sentimental love, but fierce, accepting, forgiving love. Love that says, I don't need to understand. I choose to release. So the next time you remember someone who has passed, don't just mourn. Speak. Light a candle. Close your eyes and say, "You may go. I'll remember." You may never know what soul you helped, but somewhere in a field of quiet waiting, a light just turned on. And maybe that light was always yours. A symbolic and spiritual analysis of content circulating in the Church's obscure records. Deep inside Rome, beyond the known corridors of marble and reverence, lies a vault no visitor can enter. A labyrinth of silence, sealed by time and by oaths stronger than stone. It houses not just history, but memory, a memory the Church keeps in shadow. Among those shadows is said to be a document. No official stamp, no formal recognition, but its whispers have echoed. It speaks of souls. Souls caught between realms. Souls stalled not in punishment, but in waiting. These are not stories for sermons. They are threads of mystery, woven into the quiet spaces of Vatican records, slipped through centuries of redacted truth. The text refers to zones of spiritual stagnation, places where souls remain bound, not because they are wicked, but because something in them has not completed. It ties these conditions to possessions, hauntings, and apparitions wrongly framed as demonic. It suggests that some of what we call evil is simply pain in spiritual form. Long ago, church rituals were not just meant to cast out. They were designed to guide, to assist those souls in transition, to gently, reverently remember them into the light. Old rites, now lost or locked away, spoke not of condemnation, but of compassion. A phrase reportedly found in a fragment of the text reads, "May the memory's light awaken the one who sleeps unaware. May the sound of water touch the soul that has been dry too long." Not prayers of force, but of invitation. Not exorcisms, but exits. These rituals didn't fight darkness. They opened doors. The document also mentions Marian apparitions, those rare holy visions seen in times of great loss, war, plague, genocide. But what if those were not just heavenly visitations? What if they were bridges? Spiritual portals opening not to warn the living, but to escort the dead. In places like Fatima and Medjugorje, crowds reported feeling an inexplicable peace. Some saw their ancestors in dreams. Others reported sudden calm in homes that once held sorrow. What if Mary was not only a mother of mercy, but a keeper of passage? If that's true, why did the Church bury it? Because to accept it means admitting that death is not a line, it is a field. And in that field are many paths, some delayed, some obscured, some needing our help to become clear. It means acknowledging that ritual is not only for the living, it's for the crossing. But much was lost in the pursuit of order. Liturgies were simplified, mysticism erased, masses for the forgotten, discontinued, rites of reconciliation between worlds, silenced, and yet some remnants remain. Some priests still whisper them. Some keep ancient phrases scribbled in margins, passed like relics between those who know. The most haunting line from the alleged text: "Not every lost soul is cursed. Some have simply forgotten the way, and it is our task to remember for them." What does that make us? Witnesses, lanterns, keepers of spiritual maps. Perhaps the real exorcism is not the expelling of evil, but the remembering of light. Perhaps these souls are not seeking escape, but echoing a call. Show me where I am. And perhaps, in some ancient part of you, you already know how. Because memory is a form of passage, and to remember is to open a door. The old rites knew this. That's why, alongside each psalm, they lit a candle, not to illuminate a room, but to guide a soul. And maybe, just maybe, you were meant to be that light. Forgotten techniques from the Essenes and Egyptians to assist trapped souls. There are objects that remember. There are gestures that, when repeated with intention, don't just honor mystery, they activate it. Mirrors, doors, bells, salt, too. The ancient mind, These were not superstitions. They were instruments, not of fear, but of transition. The Essenes, a mystical Jewish sect steeped in sacred practice, believed death was not the end, but a journey, and a soul, newly departed, needed direction. When someone passed, they covered the mirrors in the house, not from dread, but from reverence. They believed that reflections could confuse a soul, entangling it in what it once was. So for 7 days, no mirror was looked into. Because the eyes, they said, are bridges, and to stare into them too soon could hold the departing too close to this world. The Egyptians knew this too. Death to them wasn't a door, it was a corridor, a series of rooms the soul must walk through, guided by ritual, symbol, and archetype. Anubis, Osiris. These were not gods to be feared, but stations of transformation. They rang bells at thresholds. Why? Because sound breaks pattern. A pure tone slices through mental residue. Where grief clings, the bell cuts, not violently, but cleanly, and salt. Salt was sacred. Placed at the entrance of the home, it was not there to ward off darkness, but to anchor. Light, salt binds, salt preserves, salt remembers. Indigenous cultures across continents speak of thin places, spaces where the veil is lighter, the matter softer, the air electric. Old trees, still lakes, open sky. There they performed rituals, but not for show. They sang not to summon, but to align, to remember the old language. Today we have homes that hum with artificial light, but are dim in meaning. We have mirrors everywhere, and yet rarely see ourselves. But the symbols remain. They have not died. They have simply waited. The soul understands symbols, and sometimes what is trapped can be freed by a single gesture. A candle lit in silence, a bell rung with intention, a breath held and released as if in memory of someone, or some part of you. You can try this now. Close your eyes. Picture a mirror draped in blue cloth. In front of it, a door. Not from your waking life, but one you've seen in dreams or in some half-remembered moment. Behind you, a bell rings once. Then, again. Then silence. Now the door opens, and something, or someone, looks at you, not with a face, but with presence. You don't need to speak, only think. You may go. I will remember. This isn't fantasy, it's reunion. Therapists trained in transpersonal psychology speak of clients who, after such meditative rituals, report relief in the room, in the body, in the breath. Not because a ghost was removed, but because a soul was recognized. In some African tribes, when a person died, the community gathered and whispered, "You were seen. Now you may go." That was it. No drama, no fear, just recognition. And sometimes that's all a soul needs, to be seen, not as memory, but as motion, as passage, as light finding its way home. Maybe you already know how to do this. Maybe you've just forgotten, and maybe today, you've begun to remember. Reflection. Where in us have we also not yet passed through? There are doors that don't open from the outside. There are memories that don't live in the past. They echo now, disguised as repetition, hidden in patterns we don't recognize as prayers. If some souls are trapped between worlds, perhaps not all of them are elsewhere. Perhaps some reside inside you. Think of your oldest pain, the one you don't name. The loss you packed away in a corner of the soul, promising never to disturb it. The goodbye you delayed, the truth you swallowed to keep something or someone intact. These fragments don't fade, they lodge, and what does not move? Moans, not with voice, but with patterns. Recurring choices, emotional loops. People who feel familiar too soon, moments that sting with no clear reason. What if the haunting you feel is not from without, but within? In-depth psychology, Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of us exiled from awareness, but never from existence. Left unseen, it becomes symptom. It shows up in dreams, in cravings, in the strange feeling that you're living a life that isn't quite yours. And what if the shadow isn't just psychological but spiritual? What if pieces of your soul got stuck in moments too overwhelming to process? The field of transpersonal psychology speaks of soul fragmentation, moments of shock, loss, betrayal, when the spirit splits. Part of you walks forward, another part stays behind. Those parts don't scream, they echo. We call it depression, burnout, existential, fatigue. But maybe it's not exhaustion. Maybe it's accumulation. Maybe it's a crowd of inner voices still waiting to be invited home. And maybe the souls who appear to us in dreams or in sudden presence aren't strangers. They're mirrors. The child in you that never felt safe. The version of you that died in silence. The memory you buried before you knew it was sacred. What if your inner liberation is the only ritual a wandering soul needs? Because the crossing is mutual. When we heal, the veil thins. When we remember, they are remembered. When we forgive, cords break. For us both. So light a candle, not for them, for the part of you that still waits. Speak aloud the name you haven't said in years. Whisper forgiveness to the memory you thought you'd outrun. Cover a mirror, not in fear, but in reverence. Ring a bell and ask yourself, who in me is still trapped in that room? Because everything unresolved in you goes somewhere else. Everything you hold holds you back. And maybe, just maybe, you're not freeing them. Maybe they are freeing you. A cycle that doesn't close, but opens. Return now to the first image. The stone library, the door with no name, the manuscript without an author, its fading Latin phrase, "Not all who die cross over." But maybe now, those words sound different. Maybe you've sensed that this was never about them. Not only, this has always been about you and the parts of you that remain in echo. Not the dead in the grave, but the forgotten in the heart. Not hauntings from another realm, but remnants of stories inside you that were never allowed to finish. There is something deeply human in admitting that the mystery isn't far away. It's in our unfinished goodbyes, our held-back tears, our unoffered apologies, our stubborn love. The so-called Vatican document, whether truth, legend, or symbol, reminds us of something the modern world has tried to unlearn. The soul doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals, and sometimes it loses its way, but there is always a light, even faint, even hidden, even silent. And that light might be you, not a savior, not a seer, just a soul ready to remember. Because maybe the real ritual is a breath, the real offering, your awareness. When you feel that coldness in the room, don't fear it. Feel it. When a dream repeats, don't rush to interpret, listen. When a memory returns uninvited, ask it, what haven't we finished? Stanislav Grof wrote, "The soul is a field of unfinished experience." Carl Jung whispered, "What we don't face in ourselves, we meet as fate." What if some souls are calling not for release, but for witness? And what if you are the one who can remember them into light? This doesn't require belief, only presence. So if something in you has stirred, don't explain it. Just stay with it, because maybe, at this very moment, a soul has been touched. A story, unpaused, a silence, answered. Maybe that soul was never elsewhere. Maybe it's a part of you that has finally come home. And if everything you've been searching for was hidden in a forgetting, no final explanation, just a return to the question. If you could remember, who were you before the fear?